Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack 4 Business Podcast. Over 300 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game. Are you ready to discover what your Knack 4 business truly is? Your hosts are Bernie Franz-Grote from Creative Insight and Wayne Pratt from Motive 8U Inc.
Today's topic is how to consciously improve your business leadership and success. From the audience perspective, how can you elevate your business performance to championship levels and consistently achieve your goals in today's competitive market? Our guest today, Chris Steely, is here to answer that question, and he's from the GPS Business Group. Chris is the driving force behind the GPS Business Group. It's a powerhouse of business acumen and leadership expertise. This award-winning corporate facilitator and certified NLP practitioner has spent over 2 decades transforming service-oriented businesses into high-performing champions. With an impressive background spanning from a Silicon Valley executive to Marine Corps logistics officer, Chris has honed his skills in delivering innovative strategies that propel companies forward. His unique approach is rooted in his experience as an NCAA national champion rower and coach, has empowered over 1,200 business coaches across 26 countries, and is a trusted consultant for industry titans like Tony Robbins. Chris continues to inspire and guide entrepreneurs towards unprecedented success, leveraging his MBA knowledge and proven track record of creating win-win solutions in today's competitive business landscape. Chris, you know what? Welcome. It's really good to have you here. Tell us about your favorite quote or saying, and any other tidbits of curiosity that you might want to share with the audience.
Thanks, Bernie. Great to be here. Here we are now in 2025, kicking off the new year, doing the best we can with what we got, whether it be in the United States or Canada or wherever. So it's an honor to be here today, Bernie. And Wayne, good to see you as well. I know that we talked about the context of conscious business. That's really the topic today. And we can unpack that in context. And one of the reasons I'm qualified, you asked about favorite quote. My genre is business, right? Business is all about people. It's a mechanism of value exchange. My quote in context is from Peter Drucker, the business guru. It's ubiquitous, well-renowned. He says that only 3 things happen naturally in organization: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership. And that's where consciousness comes in. It's about being aware, conscious. I love the introduction. Thank you so much for introducing me like you did. It's been a great journey. Through that process, I've developed perspectives on various levels of consciousness, right? Conscious, unconscious as well. And it's all about transcending our reality and our status quo and going to where we are compelled to be as we serve our clients most effectively. So again, thanks for having me.
Chris, our absolute pleasure. You also have a business tagline. You want to walk us through that?
I created my business about 20 years ago. The brand is called GPS Business Group, and it aligns with the unconscious process of understanding the dynamics of what we call a triple entendre, right? So you think about that. It's a GPS, it's direction, right? GPS, it's all about goals and proven strategies for growth, profit, and success. So notice the dynamic of the triple entendre, and that's one of the things I do in the context of neuro-linguistic programming. I created that brand about 20 years ago. And really what it comes down to is a synthesis of my life, everything I've done in the Marine Corps, rowing, corporate ranks, extreme leadership. It's all about doing what it takes, not about settling for best practices, but innovating and doing what it takes to optimize business results and success. And an aspect of that is optimizing the beingness as we do. Again, we're not human doings, we're human beings, right? So we get to be as optimal as we can be as we do what it takes to optimize business results and success. That's my tagline. Thanks for asking.
I think it's fascinating. You've gone from the Marine Corps, and the visual imagery of, and for any military, the Marine Corps, they have a certain presence. You've come from the Marine Corps, they have a certain presence, which is really fantastic, and they do what they do because that's what they have to do. You've come from that space on to Silicon Valley, and now you're into the coaching space. That's quite the journey. To me, the impression I get is you're flexible. Walk me through that flexing, how that all happened.
My life has been a grand journey of purpose. As a young age, I did the work, did the inner work, and it stemmed from trauma, having to deal with family of origin trauma, and following my spirit, my awareness of who I am as a human being on this planet. And it was a kind of a divine journey of following my creator's purpose, whether it be going to military boarding school when I was 16 years old and knowing the value that I had in my life, getting my degree, working when the country went to war. It was my patriotic duty to go to war. So I accepted a commission as a logistics officer in the United States Marine Corps. And that allowed my path to go down a different direction. I had already won a national championship in college, so I knew what it was like to perform at peak levels. In the Marine Corps, we say there's only two types of people that understand Marines and the enemy. Right? Nobody else understands this because Marines are just, there's a stigma that we're just, we do what it takes again. But the beautiful thing about the Marine Corps, to be able to cultivate leadership, it's all about people, right? It really is all about people. They say the Marine Corps is the last bastion of pure leadership because you're leading people and compelling them to do what it takes to win. And as we apply that, it's about planning, detailed planning, strategic planning, whether it be in the military or in a business. As you mentioned, flexibility in all your planning efforts, right? You need to be flexible. Our slogan in the Marine Corps is Semper Fidelis, which is always faithful. But we also say it's Semper Flexibilis. You always got to be flexible, right? And don't be afraid of innovation. Don't be afraid to defy convention, doing things differently. And I love how it applies to business as well as in the military. And it's about teamwork. It's cliche, right? Together, everybody achieves more. And that's how we consistently win, whether it be in the military, in the rowing shell, or even in business. And ultimately, it comes down to relationships. Relationships are critical, and you always got to cultivate them. In the military, your command and your staff, as well as with your entire organization, based on people you employ or even the people you contract on a business level. That's what my life has been about, and I appreciate the question.
Chris, when you're in business, you're trying to communicate, whether an order or a sales process, you're trying to communicate. And I have seen often and often, I know you heard what you think I said, but what you heard wasn't what I meant. Can you tell me about your journey toward NLP or neuro-linguistic programming that made you more aware and how to craft that better?
Okay, thanks for the question, Wayne. I learned about neuro-linguistic programming when I first got exposed to Tony Robbins when I was 25 years old. He made it mainstream, but NLP's been around for a while, and it's all about neuro-linguistic programming, programming the language of your brain. And what it comes down to is awareness of how we receive information through our senses, right? The neurological processes of sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and awareness of how we're receiving that information as human beings. And then linguistics, right? Using language to give meaning to that unconscious process. The implication is that there's more brain power to use. And that's the unconscious mind. So we can leverage that unconscious capability, and that's what NLP does. It allows you to optimize your brain process through language, as well as organizing ideas and actions with precision by using the right words at the right time in the right way to compel people. And you can apply it through business, health, education, athletics, communication to optimize how you perform. I got my certification as an NLP practitioner about 12 years ago, and I've been using it to help compel people and persuade them to be more effective, active listeners and responding with effect as leaders.
Have you found that working with companies, what are the challenges they have in communicating, in managing their space? What are the most common problems you're encountering when you're having chats with people?
I primarily work with corporate teams, organizations employed by companies, and the strategic leaders understand the value of optimizing that team's performance and results. And I think the biggest challenge, Bernie, is misaligned motives. People are doing things for the wrong reasons. A lot of people just want to make money. There's nothing wrong with making money. But if that's the primary motive, maybe there's something to confront in the context of being more conscious in how we live our lives, balancing that awareness of the pragmatic realities of why we do business or why we work, and being aware of how to innovate based on specific business models, strategies, and market conditions, and get those motives to align. And again, I mentioned before, business is value exchange. So how is that value being delivered? And it's all about having strategies that are pragmatic and unchanging that have to be done with effect, right? And that's what we call championship level performance.
Getting the team together in alignment. Everybody has to have that common goal. You mentioned something about the consciousness and balance. Do you find that when you're in a larger organization, some of this gets diluted and sometimes that causes friction for people? In other words, everybody wants to go home. Everybody wants to earn a good wage. But all of a sudden, someone wants to go deeper into this area. This is another market space. I want to get in there. Meanwhile, someone else, you can have either the manufacturing arm and the marketing arm, or they're pushing and pulling, but they're tapping into the same resource pool. So they all can't have a piece of the pie. You can't have the cake. How do you get them to align so that they're not cutting each other off by accident or intent?
It starts with self-awareness, that conscious realization of why we're here, why you're here. I'm a purpose guy. I believe I was put here for a reason. It's imperative that we discover that, right? And determine where our competencies lie. There's a Japanese term called ikigai, and it's all about knowing why you're here on the planet, what your competencies are, what your pragmatic business needs are, what your strengths are, and what your passions are, and aligning those through whatever it takes, whether it be education, whether it be refining leadership. A lot of people will read a book about leadership and think they know how to lead. Leadership is actually something you're not born with it. It's not necessarily trained. It's fostered in the crucible of leadership, right? Awareness of self, and then being holistically fit, whether it be physical fitness, not necessarily strength and endurance, but taking care of our bodies, our flesh and bone physical fitness, mental fitness, taking responsibility for honing the edge of the mind. That's what NLP does. Optimizing the way we think, learning how we think, and keeping that mind strong. My father was my best friend. He passed away about 14 years ago after 7 years with Alzheimer's. So he had dementia. So for me, since then, it's been a journey of how to keep the mind healthy, how to keep the mental fitness strong as well. It's so easy to sit in front of a hypnotic box, which is what a television is, and just watch TV and get hypnotized. But it's about maybe reading books instead. So fitness, physical, mental, and then of course, emotional fitness. We're all raised as human beings by two parents that did the best they could. But understanding the dynamics of our identity and how we were raised, and understanding the emotional paradigms that drive us. It's not about stuffing your emotions. It's about truly understanding what they're telling you. So holistic fitness, physical fitness, mental fitness, emotional fitness, that has a lot to do with it.
It's one thing I just noticed that when you mentioned NLP, and I always thought it was about how you're communicating to others, but it's both directions. It's also the training for yourself.
It's about effective listening. It's about hearing what's being said as well as what's not being said through tonality, voice, inflection, pace, reading people, having empathy, extending ourselves as leaders into other people's spaces, and actually caring. That has a lot to do with it. Is basically reading. Extreme consciousness is about energetic awareness. We're all energetic beings and we emit a field of energy, right? And I've learned about this through deep work, consciousness journeying, and transcendental experiences. So I've got a level of reality and understanding that I'd like to challenge people to have as well, right? Being able to see what is not being seen, understand the ununderstandable, and caring and actually extending ourselves into other people's spaces. That's what the real leaders do.
Our North American culture right now seems to be celebrating win-lose. For me to win, you have to lose. And then the other ditch, I think, is even more toxic, where I'll be a martyr, you'll win, I'll lose. Tell me about crafting win-win.
I love that you talk about this. It's one of the things I do in my seminars when I work with teams. is we actually experience ourselves as team players. We live in a society where oftentimes there's polarized positions. So the only result is a win-lose scenario. It's really important to create consensus-based organizations to foster win-win scenarios. Rapport, authentic rapport, caring, and not faking it, but actually really caring. People can see if you don't. Authentic rapport and being strong and conscious in your motives and your position as a leader. Back to motives. There's nothing wrong with making money, but if that's the primary driver, I've seen in this world that oftentimes people will overpower versus empower people to achieve those motives. So being strong and conscious in what your motives are as leaders, as business leaders, and what it comes down to is listening, being present, listening well, and responding with ability. That is our responsibility, is to respond with ability as effective leaders. And again, it being that empowering leader versus the overpowering leader, which apparently is the old school way of getting things done. I'm here to tell you, gents, going forward for this new era of this 2025 and beyond, empowering leaders are the ones that are going to win and foster win solutions.
You touched on leadership. So if someone is starting their business up, what tips would you suggest that they do? In other words, when you're a solopreneur, you're your own boss, you're your own team. You start tapping into other resources like the accountant, people that have the specialties that you have to rely on as part of your business growth. But when they start growing and onboarding a team, what tips would you offer them to help maintain that flexibility and explore?
The first thing is to realize that entrepreneurship, business ownership in the capitalistic society we as Canadians or Americans deal with is a challenge. In the context of value exchange, I'm here to confront a challenge. And nobody ever said it was going to be easy. When things get tough, it's important to understand why that struggle is occurring. As conscious leaders, we stepped into a capacity where we welcomed this challenge in order to grow. Is it belief system based? What is our belief system? This is one of the things as we talk about consciousness. Why do we believe what we believe? They say that identity is sculpted between 0 and 2 years old. What was our environment like when we were 0 to 2 years old? Why do we believe what we believe? And how is that driving our motives, our values, our competencies? Do we have the competence to do what must be done? A lot of people go into business for the wrong reasons and end up not having the competence to truly be successful. One of the ground rules that I speak towards in the context of performance and effectiveness is really taking full ownership of your role in your life and in business. Willing to be held accountable toward doing what it takes, not just saying it, but be held accountable to be effective and being fully responsible. Too many people are shirking responsibilities. We live in a world where a lot of people operate from the position of blame. They're casting blame or making excuses, or maybe they're just in denial. Conscious business is about keeping it oriented toward no blame, no excuses. Realize I'm fully responsible for the results I'm getting now. That mindset, that heart set, that way of being makes all the difference.
40 years ago, there was a belief you got your education and then you lived your education, but it was never keep learning. This innovative keep learning is fairly new, mostly because some of us have failed at what we were taught, as you said, may even not have been right in the first place. How do you use continuous learning with integrity to grow you and your business?
From my perspective, continuous learning is not even a choice. One of my mantras is if you're not learning, you're not growing, you're dying. Just like a tree. The business is just like a tree. It's either growing or it's dying, right? Always being aware of what you think you know and leverage that knowledge and that competence. If we knew how to innovate, we'd be doing it, right? AI is going to force us to innovate and do things in ways that are revolutionary. So as we grow, as we learn, leaders are readers. Back to mental fitness, read books. The secrets to success are hidden in books. And I'm a prolific reader. I've read about 2,000 business books in my life. The imperative is you read them and then you apply the lessons learned into a reality and you actually integrate them. And then market research as well, especially if you're in a business. What's going on in your marketplace? How are you differentiating yourself as a business leader? Is your value something that is being perceived as unique? Leveraging AI, making sure that you understand the effect that AI can have and leverage that effectively. There's so many different platforms and it's just exploding. But don't let that be daunting. Be conscious of that reality of who you are, who we are as business leaders, and apply that to be able to be successful. Because again, you're either growing or you're dying. So growth is not a choice.
I like that. Don't get in a rut. Otherwise, you just have a really long grave. You touched on something about reading. Sometimes if you drink from the same well, but just a different land, right? You're always getting leadership. Are there other areas you take your mind, other sources of information to draw inspiration? One area has a certain vein of thought. Like if you're studying medicine, right? The Western medicine has a certain look. Eastern medicine has a different look. They have taken on a different tact. You've talked about consciousness and focusing on that. That has a kind of a flavor from the Far East. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. The energy is key. How do you make sure you're getting outside of any echo chamber? Because some days it's the same answer. It's the same answer. Different person talking.
And I love that you integrated into the question, Bernie, the word consciousness. The need for what we call conscious leadership in today's society is urgent and imperative. As the world becomes more interconnected, more diverse, more complex, right? Traditional models of leadership focus primarily on authority, control, and short-term goals are no longer sufficient. Conscious leadership, which emphasizes self-awareness, empathy, and ethical decision-making, is essential as we navigate this rapidly changing landscape and address the pressing challenges facing organizations, communities, and the planet. So the need for that level of conscious leadership is not just a response to the failings of traditional leadership models. It's a proactive approach to addressing the complex, interconnected, and evolving challenges of the modern world. And by fostering that self-awareness, empathy, ethical decision-making, and a longer-term perspective, conscious leaders can create positive, sustainable change in organizations and society as a whole. As we face these unprecedented global challenges, the demand for conscious leadership has never been more critical.
I think we need to mention the reverse. I'm very concerned about society sleepwalking, where we're not only not conscious, we're unconscious. How can you decide to wake up or help someone get conscious so that you can do, be, and have more?
It's funny, Wayne, we talk about conscious versus unconscious. Right. A lot of people are the walking dead. The metaphor is people are just unconscious. But that's an implication of conscious versus unconscious. Consciousness, true consciousness is awareness of our unconscious process and not letting that get the best of us. For instance, right now we're aware of what we're seeing, hearing, smelling, and hey, good job beating your heart. That was intentional, wasn't it? No, that's an unconscious process. But the key is to understand that we have those dynamics that we get to do our best to be aware of, consciousness and awareness, and transcend, if you want to call it that, the realities and the paradigms that keep us stuck. So there's that word again, innovation, right? Doing what it takes to be able to do things in a different way that's going to really change the world. That's the game I'm playing. And that's what I love. It's also the game you guys are playing right now as well. And measuring and tracking progress toward results, right? In the context of the value we as business leaders are here to provide with effect, with consciousness, with competence as well.
Chris, how do you learn from mistakes? We all live in fear that we're going to do something wrong, so we tend to try to do nothing. How do you make a mistake, own up to it, and grow? And how do you get to survive long enough to relearn?
We were talking about 10 minutes ago that one of the things I've learned in a very pronounced way since I started my entrepreneurial journey is the effect of failure, if we call it that. I also know there's no such thing as failure. There's only results. But there's so many things that don't work out the way they should, right? And it's important to learn from those mistakes. And that's how we learn and grow, and embrace those failures as lessons that are learned. But you're right, Wayne, a lot of people do what I call it an ostrich technique, where they just bury their head in the sand and they're in denial. They don't want to know what they don't know, and they just don't want to know it because they're comfortable. Life and effectiveness begins outside of your comfort zone. I always tell my client teams, hey, I'm not in it for your comfort. I'm in it for your results and success. Doing what it takes to condition physical, mental, emotional fitness to excel and expand and break those paradigms. So I want more pleasure and less pain. Realize that's a situation. As failures occur, as things happen that weren't what we had planned, then we get to adapt. It's just like a martial artist in the dojo. The black belts become black belts by being thrown off balance. Can they do what it takes to be able to somatically get back in balance? That metaphor applies toward life and business as well. Embrace those failures as opportunities and challenges to overcome.
Failures is one element. Frustration is another element. Here's an example. Bernie's driving down the 4-lane highway that cuts through Ottawa, the Queensway, as it's called. I'm in the passing lane and I'm looking ahead of me. Buddy's just sitting there and going, you're not passing the car, but you're blocking. Either pick up the pace, drop the pace. Legally, that person's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm sitting there and the inner German's going, what are you doing? And my wife is sitting back and to the side of me. She goes, perhaps you're missing some event on the horizon that you haven't seen or been aware of. So she's trying to bring me into another level of consciousness and to call the inner Jamaican inside my soul the can to go, chill, man. It's like, whatever, right? It's not do or die moment. But that brings to the other level of consciousness that sometimes things don't go according to plan. I think back to the Marine Corps days. Yeah, you have a plan of action, and sometimes the enemy helps you readjust that plan. But on that same model, how do you get to the point where you're going, that's not working out, not get spun up and go, what do I take from this? And what do I start looking for? Because now you're going, this is happening. It's a curveball, not anticipating it. What can I learn from it, or what can I pick up on it?
So I think the key is I apply the metaphor toward a battle campaign, because as an officer of the Marine Corps, we're taught to strategize. There's the strategy, there's the planning, right? Having an effective strategic plan. But we also know that the battle is not won until the boots hit the ground and the tactics are conducted. So it starts with planning, actually having a plan, especially in the context of communication, as we talk about innovating business and making sure that you and your team are aligned with your core competencies, right? A strategic communication plan. The leaders lead, they lead in meetings, right? That's one of the things I love to teach business leaders is how to run effective meetings, because there's so many meetings that just shouldn't be had. But agenda-driven meetings created consciously with awareness of applying you and your team's competencies through planning and having those accountability mechanisms. Back to my tagline, doing what it takes. How will you know if you've done what it takes or not? Accountability mechanisms and consistent reporting and feedback through communication with authenticity, care, and respect. Realizing we're all human beings. We do the best we can. So having grace and being that leader that actually does care and is empathetic, yet at the same time oriented toward results. If you can get the team to operate like a Marine Corps platoon, a rowing shell, or an effective corporate team to be in lockstep and oriented toward what needs to be done collectively, that's what I call synthesizing genius, right? And that's as a certified award-winning corporate facilitator, that's what I do. Bring people together and synthesize that genius through planning, accountability mechanisms, effective tactics, and making sure that people are being as strong as they can be physically, mentally, emotionally, and then holding each other accountable toward the standards that we set for ourselves as a team.
It's interesting because usually when people talk about a crowd or a group, when you have groupthink, the IQ drops typically. It just goes ebb and flow. But what you're saying, and to be agile and responsive, you're raising that crowd IQ. Would that be fair to say? Everybody's got that common alignment. Plan A is not working. Here's a subroutine. Do this to get around. The door's locked or the door is not there. Make one type of scenario. Is that the type of thinking then that you're looking for? And
Yes.
raising that IQ collective?
If you're on the team, you're on the team for a reason, and you've got an important role to play. The leader's responsibility is to include everybody. As you consider the genius, that's one of the things I love when I work with corporate teams and I work with different companies in different industries. I don't know what they know about their business, but I can allow them to inquire in the context of what they do know collectively as a team and synthesize that, as opposed to, okay, we're just going to do the bare minimum just to get by. And we're going to, again, sit on the couch, watch TV, eat potato chips, and not get fit. So just being aware of, again, consciously aware of how we as leaders could be more fit. I'm pretty fit, but I'm always raising my bar of awareness next around how I could be even more fit, agile, empathetic, and better listener. That is the imperative.
I was really impressed until you dissed potato chips. I do have a serious question. I think it's actually what you teach. But if you ask 100 solopreneurs if they're successful, as a general rule, they're going to say, I think I'm successful. And about 3 sentences in, you realize that they don't know what success even looks like. They've never, ever defined the metrics. How do you help them? And I know it's hard to be generic, but how do you help them design metrics so they can be successful in what they're trying to do?
Well, so the imperative is it's all about the mechanisms that drive their business, right? I conduct a growth map process, a strategic planning process where I run business leaders through 14 key dynamics of business that are pragmatic. But the imperative is how do they apply toward their specific offering, their value exchange mechanism? So the answer, Wayne, is I don't know. The business leader knows because they went into business for a reason with the right motive. Query them in the context of this process and determine which parameters, which benchmarks, which milestones, which plans, which goals. What's their vision? Why are they doing what they're doing? What is that mission? If you go back to the military, we've got a mission to conduct. Values. What are your core values? And decipher those. My job is to help people really tap into their essence, back to purpose, right? And draw that out of them. And then lead effectively with a team to be able to achieve those metrics that they deem are most important.
You've worked with a pretty large name. Tony Robbins is a fairly recognizable name throughout the globe. What lessons have you learned from working with Tony?
I met Tony Robbins when I was 25 years old. I bought his personal power program on cassette tape. I learned personal power. That's what gave me the courage to go in the Marine Corps. And 2 years later, the war started and I had the courage to do that because of my personal power. I toured with him for several years and worked with him and his clients to apply the principles he espouses in his mechanisms, whether it be neurolinguistic programming, the dynamic of state, focus, making sure that you actually have a business strategy as you apply the concepts into business. But really what it comes down to with Tony, it's all about self-awareness, knowing who you are, why you are, and what you were put here to do, and then performing at peak levels, right? I've proven that I can do that. National athletic champion, Marine Corps, and always raising that standard, raising our standards. As soon as you think they're high, raise them. That's how things are going to get done, as opposed to settling for that status quo. It's funny, in our circles, status quo is actually profanity. It's all about raising that bar. Ultimately, really, what it comes down to is Tony's all about reinforcing those standards. Knowing thyself, living life that's compelling. It compels you, it motivates you, back to those motives, and reinforcing that and applying that to a world that wants to be effective. It wants to be as good as it can be. And that's what Tony teaches. And I love that he teaches that. I actually bring those strategies out to my clients as well. So it's good stuff.
Do you find that there's a certain personality type, assuming all people can be trained? Is there a certain personality type this is going to take a little more elbow grease? You got to pass the next level versus another person who's, yep, got it, bang, boom. And you turn on the light, they know exactly where to go. Is there a certain personality type or a certain circumstance which is fertile or it's going to take more effort to bring it around?
It depends on the role, Bernie. One of the things I do with my client teams is we always do profiling. And there's mechanisms for profiling so people can understand what their types are, what their personalities are, what their tendencies are. And we need all the personalities, right? You've got introverts, you've got extroverts, right? You got people that are data oriented and you got people that are more people oriented, right? But the imperative is not to think that one's any better than the others. Back to the dynamic of inclusivity. As leaders, it's important to bring those competencies into the capacity that has to be conducted in order to achieve a result. For instance, since we're talking about Tony Robbins, Tony and I share a similar personality type. We're gregarious extroverts. We're driven. We get things done. And there's a need for that. There's also a need for people that are detail-oriented, right? That are all about studies and systems and everything. And that's not necessarily my tendency. The imperative is to play toward our strengths and delegate and allow other people to play toward their strengths with synchronized harmonic synthesis, like a good orchestra does. That's how orchestra music is conducted and played when it's done with precision. It brings all the instruments to bear to create beautiful music together.
I have found lately there's been a emphasis on doom scrolling. The world's ending and here's why, and it's only going to get worse. And then we watch media that backs that up for us. You don't strike me as a doom scroller. So if you think things could and should get better in the next 3 to 5, incrementally, tell me how that's going to happen.
So Wayne, I love that you bring that up. The whole dynamic of doom scrolling and everything. It's the drama, right? You turn on the TV. What's the media got you doing? It's got you in fear. It's got you freaking out. It's got you applying the drama. So it's back to consciousness, being aware of why you're tending to do that, right? Our basic human instincts of pleasure, pain are going to compel us to follow that. And in today's world, it's almost validated. So if that is occurring, realize that's not how success is going to occur. Focusing on striving toward that high ground, not focusing on how bad things are, but doing what it takes, not thinking about doing what it takes, not doom scrolling and getting sucked up into the drama, but actually overcoming that and compelling ourselves to be motivated, back to those motives, to do what it takes to exchange the value we were put here to deliver as purpose-driven people. Just break free from that paradigm. Too many people are in denial of it. We just got to break past it and take responsibility.
So, Chris, do you service us the continental U.S., North America, this half of the hemisphere?
Yeah, my practice is international. I got exposed to Asia Pacific about 20 years ago. That's what compelled me to start my business. I lived in Australia for a while. I worked mostly in Australia for several years, but I've worked all around the planet. I love Kiwis in New Zealand, great people to work with. I've worked through Asia Pacific. I've got Europe, lots of activity and clients in Europe. I am here in the United States. I love Canadians. Canadians are just about the best people to work with. Canadians are smart, right? Educated generally, and they care. I love that. A lot of the stuff I'm saying to you, Bernie and Wayne, you get it, right? I love working with Canadians. I won an award for facilitation with a Mexican-based company. We worked together for a few years and won an award, and it was great. I love international business, but I am a patriot. I'm a Yank, so I am here based in the States, but my practice is international.
If this resonates, how would they get a hold of you?
I always tell you, if you want to know about me, just Google my name. Everybody should Google their name and see what their reputation is. So I'm all over the internet. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a great profile on LinkedIn. gpsbusinessgroup.com is my website. If you want to email me, my email address is csteely, so first initial last name, @gpsbusinessgroup.com. I'm wide open. I'm receptive. But again, LinkedIn's a great mechanism to be able to see what we do. I'm well published, lots of articles across LinkedIn as well. I was one of LinkedIn's beta guys back in 2006. So yeah, that's how we get in touch. But I'm wide open and willing to have conversations with anybody who wants to raise their bar and challenge themselves.
I want to say thanks. Thank you, Chris Steely, Wayne Pratt, the co-host, and you, especially you, the Knack for Business listeners. I appreciate it. I want to say thanks for your time, but also if you're curious as to how to improve your game, your business game, getting that consciousness level up so you're not in a long rut, reach out to Chris. He can help you in your corporate space.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, WayneEmotive8U, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter U.ca, or his website, motive8u.ea. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people: Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert; Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host; Jovan Strika from A Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space; then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner; and Wayne Pratt from Motive8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer: please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.